What's up guys, it's Tom here and welcome to a brand new video where we will talk about the huge news coming out from England in some media outlets that Manchester City are highly likely to be dealt a Premier League points deduction this season or next season after the Champions League ban forces the Premier League to take action as well. The Premier League also has a financial fair play rule book basically, which is a little bit less strict, but it is very similar to the financial fair play rules that are operating in the Champions League and in the Europa League. And basically the Premier League champions Manchester City, after being given an unprecedented 2-season Champions League ban, could face action from the Premier League. So what do you think about this news? And we will take a deep dive into the issue and what it means. And the Premier League is at the moment in a waiting game basically, because I think they are waiting for the Court of Arbitration for Sport to make the case ruling after Manchester City of course appealed against the decision. But that ruling could conclude as late as July, which is really late, and I don't think there is a point for the Premier League to put Manchester City at a points deduction this season, because they can't achieve Champions League football anyway next season, and also because the title race is over. I think if the Premier League waits until the Court of Arbitration for Sport announces their decision, they could give Manchester City like an 8 or 10 point deduction at the start of next season, which would make it a lot more interesting in my opinion, and a lot more just, because if Man City get a point deduction this season, I mean, what's the point of that? They can't qualify for the Champions League next season. They are already out of the title race. The points deduction would be effectively absolutely meaningless. Let me know what do you think about this. Would it be a more just punishment if Man City started next season with a points deduction, making it even more difficult for them to win the Premier League title? And there is of course a lot of big questions surrounding Manchester City right now. Will Pep Guardiola stay? Will he go? Will some of the big players stay if they know that the 2 years without Champions League is in effect from next season? Of course, we still have to wait until that appeal is concluded by the courts, and I think this is a very interesting situation. And also there is another very interesting topic that I want to discuss in this video, and that is that the period where Manchester City made the cheating basically, where they didn't follow the financial fair play rules, is from 2012 to 2016, and between that time they won the Premier League in 2014, finishing 2 points ahead of Liverpool. And some people are saying that Manchester City should be stripped from their titles, and even more like other people are saying that the second place team who played Manchester City in a cup final, or in the case of a title race, who finished second behind Manchester City, should get a title. And that is Liverpool in this case, who finished 2 points behind Manchester City in the 2013-14 season. Of course, that was the famous season where Luis Suarez scored 31 goals and he started the season being banned for biting Ivanovic the season before. And let me know, how would you feel if Steven Gerrard and that Liverpool team got a Premier League title retrospectively? I'm very torn with this, because I thought long and hard about this and what would feel right for me. My heart says, and this is where my Liverpool fandom comes in, and I'm a huge fan of Steven Gerrard. Probably one of the biggest fans of Steven Gerrard. I idolized Steven Gerrard growing up, and I wanted nothing more than to see him lift the Premier League title, the Premier League trophy, and I know that he wanted nothing more than to do this. Manchester City basically gained an unfair advantage by breaking the financial fair play rules and signing a lot of world-class players, which they couldn't really afford, but because they inflated artificially their sponsorship sponsorship deals, they could sign those players, and the money was pumped into Manchester City. And while Liverpool played by the rule book, they followed the financial fair play rules from the beginning of financial fair play being introduced to Europe. It's an unfair advantage. In athletics, when one contestant is doping and cheating, that's an unfair advantage, and the other contestants, that athlete who is cheating, those results are deleted basically, and the second place athlete wins the race if it is found that the other athlete who won the race cheated. So in this case, they should just strip Manchester City of the title. And as I said, my head says, let's leave history as it is, and let's not award retrospective titles, because it just feels a little bit hollow. But also my heart says, and what my heart says is quite funny actually, that Liverpool should organize a charity game. Let's invite the squad of that Liverpool team, whoever can come from that team, Steven Gerrard and all the other, Luis Suarez, Dirk Kuyt, all the other Liverpool players who played in that team at that time of the 13-14 season. They should again don the famous Liverpool shirt and play a charity game against like a World 11 or a European 11 or something like that. All proceeds go to charity. And at the end of the game, whatever the result, let's just give Gerrard the Premier League trophy, and next to his former teammates who they played together in that famous season, let's just give Steven Gerrard the Premier League trophy, and he can lift it in front of the Liverpool fans, in front of Anfield, just to give him a feeling of lifting a Premier League trophy. That's what my heart says. I know it's a silly idea probably, and maybe I will get some stick for this in the comments below, but you have to understand that I'm a huge Steven Gerrard fan, and I just wanted nothing more than that man who grew up like a Liverpool fan from a boyhood age. He was always dreaming about lifting famous trophies for Liverpool, and he lifted every trophy but the Premier League trophy, sorry. He lifted the Champions League, the FA Cup, the League Cup numerous times as a captain, but he never lifted the Premier League trophy. And I just want Steven Gerrard to complete his life basically and to lift the Premier League trophy as a player. But of course he's not a player anymore, he's retired, he's now the manager of Rangers, so it would probably be pretty weird if that happened. But as I said, that's what my heart says. My head says just strip Manchester City of their titles and award them to no one, and just let history be history. And yeah, I think the more just punishment, if it is proven beyond doubt that Manchester City cheated the system, cheated and didn't follow the rules, if it is proven by the Court of Arbitration for Sport as well, then let's give them a point deduction of like 8 or 10 points next season, and also uphold the 2-year Champions League ban, because this needs to be a lesson for all the clubs in the world, that you need to follow the rules. Because if everybody else is following the rules, one club is not following the rules, that's a very unfair advantage for that one club. And also it messes up the transfer market, and it is unfair on the other clubs as well. If Manchester City inflates the transfer prices even more by paying a lot of money for a lot of players, that is also an inflating the transfer market for everybody else, and that's unfair to every other club who maybe doesn't have the financial resources of Manchester City. So that's my opinion, guys, and I would love to hear what you think about this. And I think that this is a very, very interesting case. I think the Court of Arbitration for Sport has to conclude this appeal process much quicker, because if it's July and the Premier League is already finished, and for example, let's just use an example, Tottenham finish in 5th place, or Sheffield United or Wolves, or even like Man United finish in 5th place. And up until July, they won't know whether they will play in the Champions League or in the Europa League. And that's absolutely unacceptable for those clubs, because a lot of planning goes on during the season, and if they are talking to players, it makes a huge difference whether they can offer Champions League football or just Europa League football to the players who they are talking to. And also it makes a lot of difference for Manchester City as well. So I think that it needs to be a lot quicker. It is understood that Premier League committees had already discussed potential punishments on the provision that UEFA punished City, and the points deduction is now seen as highly likely. A City statement, of course, stressed that they will appeal the decision at the earliest possible opportunity, and the appeal process is already on the way. There remains a high possibility that the very, very high price, the legal battle, could yet see the Champions League ban overturned. The sources do not feel that this will be the case with any Premier League punishment due to the specific situation. A points deduction would not affect any title race or see Manchester City relegated, and the Champions League race has been temporarily rendered irrelevant because of the Champions League ban. The points deduction for this season would be pretty pointless for Manchester City, wouldn't it? There is a very, very remote possibility, but still a possibility that we need to discuss, of Manchester City getting kicked out from the Premier League, basically propulsion from the Premier League. And what is interesting about this is that it won't be a case like where Juventus got into a cheating scandal where they bribed match officials and they got relegated to the second division, the Serie B. The Football League has recently changed their rules in England so that any club who is expulsion from the Premier League, basically who are kicked out from the Premier League, they have to start in League 2. And what is very interesting about this is that Pep Guardiola, according to some inside sources in Manchester City, have recently said that even if Manchester City get relegated to League 2, he will not resign. He will stay and he will try to get Manchester City back promoted, which I find very, very unlikely. I mean, Guardiola is trying to build a legacy as a manager. He's trying to become the best manager that ever coached in world football, so he needs every single year to count in his CV. Basically, he can't afford to take on a big project where he comes up through the leagues. He needs to win titles and trophies, European titles, domestic titles, every season that he's managing. So when he's reaching 60, 70 years old, he has more titles than anybody else. That's what Guardiola is trying to build. So I don't feel he's the kind of manager who would just stay at Man City without Champions League football. And I see no chance for Guardiola to stay at Man City if they got relegated to League 2, because I mean, would Guardiola just sit through 3 years of football in the lower leagues and not competing in the Premier League, not competing in the Champions League? Yeah, that's very, very unlikely, and I can't see that happening at all. And I wanted to touch on and talk about Steven Gerrard again a little bit, because this is what he said. I'm really interested in this case for obvious reasons, because Steven Gerrard wants to see how the Premier League punishes Manchester City for breaking and breaching financial fair play rules. And of course this is a big story, because Steven Gerrard was the captain who lost out to Manchester City in the title race in the 2013-14 season, and this is what Gerrard said. I read that story myself this morning. We will wait and see. From a UEFA point of view, it is a real strong sentence and punishment. I'm sure they will appeal, so we will wait and see what the outcome is on that. Then we will see whether the Premier League act from there. I will give you a comment once I know that the Premier League decide to do. But if you look at the severity of the punishment from UEFA, something has gone badly wrong. So I'm not really I'm really interested to see the outcome of that. Until I get the punishment from the Premier League, I won't comment, but I'm really interested in it for obvious reasons. It's all ifs and buts, but it is what it is. Manchester City were champions. As I sit here right now, congratulations to them, they are champions. Until things develop, if they develop, it's all ifs and buts. You know, I've got nothing to say on the matter. All I say is that something has gone really wrong at Manchester City, and it needs to be investigated. And maybe Steven Gerrard is hinting here that he is very interested, obviously, because if Manchester City will be stripped of their title in 2014, probably Steven Gerrard wants the Premier League to award Liverpool and him the Premier League title. But I'm just trying to read between the lines. Of course, Steven Gerrard won't come out and say this publicly, otherwise it would probably get too much criticism from everybody. I'm actually very fascinated to find out how this plays out, and of course Steven Gerrard is very interested in this as well, because this could directly impact his football legacy. Because if Steven Gerrard got awarded a Premier League title retrospectively, it would complete his footballing career. Then he could say that he won every title and every trophy available to him as a footballer. Of course, domestically as a club player, not internationally. But I'm really interested to find out what will happen when the appeal process is over. And also Arsene Wenger, who I have a huge amount of respect for, has spoken out on this topic of Manchester City's Champions League ban, and this is what he said. He believes that the final league table in the top leagues are linked to the amount of money that clubs spend, and he wants teams to show more respect for the rules by competing fairly. And this is what he said: "My belief is that sport is about trying to win by respecting the rules. We celebrate the best in every sport, but only if we know the winners respect the rules. If there is no respect, then it's not real sport. The table is always linked to the amount of money that clubs spend on players. I was always in favor, or even favor, of financial control on clubs and income that is not natural. I am also convinced that the rules still have to evolve into something better, but at the moment they are what they are. If it is proven that this has been done on purpose, then Manchester City cannot go unpunished. I don't know the case well enough to say what kind of punishment has to be made. I don't know if it is planned to take City's title away, because I don't know the rules well enough, but the difference between the big clubs and the smaller clubs have become bigger, and we can now predict with accuracy what is going to happen in almost every league. And that is pretty true, and that maybe takes away a little bit the romance of football, but that's just how modern football works, because it's just now football is mostly a business. I want to give you guys the opinion of Sky Sports reporter Kaveh Solhekol, who has of course a very interesting opinion on this. This is what he said: "I think Man City have a good chance of overturning the ban. They are going to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and they said in their statement that they will go to all the way, which means that they could go even higher to the Swiss Federal Supreme Court if that appeal fails. What we have got to bear in mind," he continues, "is that Man City are richer than UEFA. They can afford to have better lawyers than UEFA. In the PSG case with Court of Arbitration for Sports, where PSG turned up with 8 lawyers and UEFA didn't send any lawyers at all, so I think there's still a good chance that Man City can get this overturned. UEFA have given them a 2-year ban, so you would think that there's a good chance that it could be reduced to 1. In the past we have seen bans reduced by the CAS, so if I was a Man City fan this morning, I wouldn't be getting too down and too depressed." And Pep Guardiola has never broken a contract before in his career, and he has told his players that he will not be leaving before his current deal expires, which expires at the end of next season, as far as I can tell. He spoke to his players at the training ground on Saturday, and he told them that they were all in this together to stay united. He didn't give the players any kind of impression he was planning on leaving the club. As far as the players are concerned, Man City pays some of the highest wages in the world. I don't think players are just going to walk away from the club because they are not going to be getting Champions League football. Obviously, it's going to be a concern for some of those players, but I think that at the moment the squad are united. They trust in the people above them at City to deal with all these kind of issues. They will just be focusing on the football and specifically on the game against Real Madrid in the Champions League, creating a siege mentality on the pitch where it's us against the world could prove beneficial. But there's no feeling that he's going to work away from his City. He's very close friends with Chiqui Bergerstein, chief executive Ferran Soriano. Bergerstein is the sporting director at Man City. So the journalist is saying that he would be very surprised if Guardiola left. From a pre-Ars perspective, it would be terrible if we walked away at this point. I don't fully agree with this, because if Man City is proven to be guilty of cheating and of knowingly not respecting the rules of financial fair play, I think it would do Guardiola more damage to stay at Man City and to associate himself with the owners and with the Man City organization if it's proven that Man City are cheaters, basically. But of course, feel free to disagree with me in the comments below. And what UEFA don't want is for the integrity of the Champions League to be questioned, and for there to be questions all through the summer over whether hypothetically it's going to be Sheffield United, Tottenham or Man City in the competition. With CAS they are very mindful of the sporting calendar, so they will try and hear appeals quickly, and they are capable of doing this quickly. The important date as far as UEFA are concerned is July, with the Champions League qualifiers starting. They will be looking to get it settled, the appeal process, before then. But would it be in Manchester City's interest to have it settled quickly? It might suit them to drag it out for as long as possible. In a lot of these cases, money does come into it, and I think it's a matter of honor for Sheikh Mansour and the Abu Dhabi group who is owning Manchester City. To be accused of cooking the books does not look good for the owners or for Abu Dhabi. I'm sure they are going to fight this for as long as hard as possible. I don't think we will know which English clubs are going to be playing in the Champions League next season until the summer, and that's very interesting. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I put a lot of time researching this for you guys, so I really appreciate if you leave a like. Thanks for watching. See you guys. Goodbye.